The cafe overlooked the gray Atlantic, waves slapping rhythmically against the pier, gulls crying over the scent of salt and seaweed. Inside, warm sunlight filtered through wide windows, illuminating polished wood tables and the quiet hum of conversation. Rachel Hayes sat alone in the corner booth, a ceramic cup of black coffee untouched before her. She wasn't reading, wasn't scrolling her phone. She was watching, observing. Every movement, every shadow, every twitch in the reflection of the glass windows caught her trained eye. She had done this countless times before, though always under different circumstances, different continents, deserts, jungles, foreign streets where a single misstep could cost a life. Her hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her attire unassuming, jeans, plain jacket, boots worn from years of travel. Anyone passing by might see an ordinary woman, perhaps even vulnerable. That was the point. The ordinary ones were the last people anyone expected to notice. Rachel had mastered the art of blending in, of being underestimated, of disappearing in plain sight. But inside, the awareness never ceased. Every sound, every shift of light, every person who entered or exited was catalogued and analyzed. It was second nature now, ingrained like muscle memory, honed over years as a United States Navy SEALs operative. She had been part of missions that were never written about, never acknowledged, and she carried those memories quietly. The cafe door swung open. 3 men walked in, their laughter loud and careless, echoing against the walls. Rachel immediately noted their posture, clothing, the way they carried themselves. One had the swagger of someone used to intimidation, the other's eyes flickered with uncertainty masked by bravado. The tallest moved with overconfidence, hands stuffed into his pockets, scanning the room until they landed on her. They saw her alone, small, quiet, and back pressed to the corner. Perfect prey, at least by their perception. One of them, shorter, stockier, wearing a faded leather jacket, smirked and nudged the tallest. "Check her out," he whispered. Rachel didn't flinch. She didn't even look directly at them. Her eyes, however, followed their every move in reflection. She noted the exit to her left, the staff entrance behind her, the potential hiding spots between tables. Every object, every person, every angle mattered. 15 seconds could mean a lifetime here. 15 seconds to react, to counter, to survive. They approached her table with casual arrogance, laughter still spilling between them. Her coffee cup remained untouched. Her fingers brushed the edge lightly, not a grip, just contact, a reminder to herself of where she was and what she was doing. The tallest leaned slightly, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial tone. "You here alone?" Rachel's reply was silence. The second man chuckled, moving a little closer, tilting his head as if her quiet defiance were some challenge to be conquered. His proximity made the hair on her arms rise, a subtle alert system she had learned to trust above all else. She observed the small details, the angle of his wrist, the weight in his step, the hesitation in the blink of his eye. Threat assessment, she thought, always threat assessment. They weren't aware she had already calculated distances. The space between her booth and the nearest exit, the length of her stride, the angle of attack should anything go wrong. She had run these scenarios in her head countless times, often under conditions far more deadly than any cafe. But the principle remained the same. Observation first, patience, timing, precision. The stockier man reached out suddenly, brushing her wrist as if by accident. It was enough. That small contact triggered every instinct she had, every memory of missions gone wrong, every tactical reflex honed through sleepless nights and relentless drills. She didn't think. She acted. Her chair scraped once as she pivoted, twisting her body with practiced ease. In a motion so fluid it seemed almost choreographed, she spun the man off his balance, sending him sprawling onto the floor. Coffee splashed, glasses rattled, and the room froze, patrons gasping as the scene unfolded before their eyes. The tallest lunged, likely expecting hesitation. She stepped aside, guided him gently but firmly where he could fall without injury, enough to incapacitate, not maim. A sharp elbow to the ribs, a controlled sweep of his legs, and he went down beside his companion. The third froze, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as recognition dawned too late. 15 seconds. That had been all it took. The cafe was silent, save for the ringing in everyone's ears, the echo of movement too fast, too precise, too clean. No wild swings, no anger, no uncontrolled rage, just efficiency, control, deadly calm that didn't belong to a civilian. Rachel adjusted her sleeve, calmly letting her hand rest back on the edge of the table as if nothing had happened. Yet in those same 15 seconds, she had communicated a truth the men would never forget. She was not prey. She was trained. She was calculated. She was dangerous. And any assumptions to the contrary had been shattered in an instant. Outside, the wind from the ocean rattled the glass panels slightly, a reminder that even in stillness the world moved. Inside, eyes followed her cautiously, whispers flitted through the cafe. Rachel sipped her coffee finally, slow, deliberate. The three men stayed where they were, groaning, trying to recover both posture and pride. She didn't gloat, she didn't need to. The lesson had already been delivered. And yet she knew this was only the beginning. In her gut, a familiar tension coiled. Something had been set into motion the moment the cafe door swung open. She had acted, yes, but she also understood that those who underestimated her rarely gave up so easily. There would be consequences. Rachel stared through the glass, eyes tracing the horizon where the ocean met the gray sky. Peace was always temporary. She had learned that during deployments far from home, far from anyone who could understand. Quiet moments were often the calm before the storm. And she was ready. The tallest man froze, his eyes wide, jaw slack. He had expected a startled, scared woman, maybe a shriek, maybe resistance clumsy enough to overpower. He had not expected efficiency. 15 seconds had reduced his friends to groaning piles on the floor, their confidence shattered. Every patron stared, mugs forgotten, breaths held, as if the entire cafe had collectively leaned forward to witness the impossible. Rachel Hayes sat back slightly, her back rigid, every muscle coiled and relaxed at once like a predator waiting to test her environment. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence spoke for her. The men realized it wasn't anger that controlled her or adrenaline. It was calculation. Every motion had a purpose. Every breath measured. The stocky man groaned, rolling onto his side, clutching his ribs. The tallest lunged forward, trying to regain dominance, but Rachel's eyes had already predicted the path of his body. She shifted slightly, pivoting on the balls of her feet. Her hands moved almost invisibly. One guided his arm in a lock, the other nudged him backward just enough to make him stumble. He hit the floor hard, gasping. The third man tried to retreat toward the door, his face pale, sweat beading at his hairline. The moment his foot crossed the threshold of the table's space, Rachel's heel intercepted him. A quick, precise step behind his knee caused him to fall forward, arms flailing just enough to catch the edge of a chair. He toppled to the floor, a soft crash echoing, his pride fractured before his body even hit the tile. 15 seconds, that was all. The cafe remained silent, the only sound the faint drip of spilled coffee and the hushed whispers of onlookers frozen in disbelief. Rachel straightened, brushing an imaginary crumb from her sleeve, casual, unshaken, as if she had been reading a newspaper all along. Patrons stared, uncertain whether to call the police, intervene, or run. Their instincts screamed at them to act, but instinct had already failed the men. The tallest one muttered something, barely coherent. "Wow, what are you?" Rachel's eyes met his, cold, steely, unblinking, a subtle warning, a promise that if he tested her again there would be no hesitation. Her lips curved just slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Not what you think," she said softly. Her voice carried no malice, only calm authority. The men understood immediately. She was not a woman to provoke. And yet there was more. That recognition brought fear, a raw, primal fear that had nothing to do with physical pain. These men, who had walked in thinking themselves predators, realized in that instant that they were exposed, vulnerable, and completely unprepared. 15 seconds had taught them a lesson their arrogance had never anticipated. Rachel's mind was already moving past the immediate threat. Threat assessment was never a one-time event. Even after neutralizing the immediate danger, she scanned the cafe. Cameras. Yes, a few discreet ones near the counter. Exits. The front door, staff door behind her, emergency exit near the restroom. Patrons. No active threats, though several appeared ready to flee. She noted the movements of each person, calculating who might panic, who might be a risk, who might need calming. The stocky man groaned again, attempting to rise, but his friend pushed him back. "Don't move," he hissed. Rachel noticed the tension in their shoulders, the uneven breathing, the instinctive flinch at every subtle movement she made. Fear was a language she knew fluently. She didn't speak it, she understood it. The cafe owner approached slowly from behind the counter, hands raised. Is everyone okay?" His voice trembled slightly. Rachel nodded, still seated, her movements measured. "Yes, they'll leave," she said. Her tone left no room for argument. The man's nod was immediate, relieved, hesitant. The three men scrambled toward the door, dignity lost, egos bruised beyond repair. They stumbled, muttered curses under their breath, and vanished into the sunlight outside. Rachel did not follow. She did not need to. The lesson had been taught. There was no need for further action. She exhaled softly, letting a tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding slip away. 15 seconds had passed, but in her mind she replayed every movement. Timing, precision, awareness. Each action logged, analyzed, understood. She didn't relive it with pride or satisfaction. She relived it to understand, to ensure nothing had been overlooked. Even now, even calm, even here, mistakes could cost far more than embarrassment. Rachel glanced out the window at the three men disappearing down the street. She didn't recognize them as threats in the larger sense. They were opportunists, reckless, foolish. But she knew enough about human behavior, enough about patterns, to suspect they wouldn't forget her presence so easily. Predators often learn slowly. Some learn too late. She sipped her coffee finally, letting the warmth anchor her. Patrons began to murmur again, the tension in the air slowly dissipating. Conversations resumed, cups clinked, chairs scraped softly against the floor. The world had returned to normal, at least on the surface. But Rachel knew better. Danger never stayed dormant for long. The ripple effect of 15 seconds had already begun. Somewhere out there, someone would hear the story, and somewhere else, someone more organized would take note. And she would be ready, always ready. She leaned back, eyes scanning reflections in the glass. Calm, observant, still, ordinary, invisible, safe. Not really. They had thought she was weak. That mistake could have been deadly. And Rachel Hayes never allowed mistakes to go unpunished. Outside, the wind carried the scent of salt and impending storm. Inside, the world had changed quietly, almost imperceptibly in just 15 seconds. And Rachel sat alone, waiting, watching, always calculating what would come next. The cafe had returned to its ordinary rhythm by the next morning. Soft music, the hum of conversation, the aroma of fresh pastries. But Rachel Hayes knew better. Normalcy was a fragile illusion, and 15 seconds of chaos had left a ripple in the calm. She sipped her coffee slowly, eyes scanning the room, noting every patron's posture, every shadow that shifted with the sunlight. Some stared at her now with curiosity. Others avoided her gaze entirely. Whispers drifted, carrying fragments of speculation, but no one dared approach. Outside, the street seemed peaceful. The gulls circled lazily, the ocean waves rolled steadily against the pier, and the town went about its morning routines as though yesterday had never happened. Rachel knew this was the perfect camouflage for what was coming. Predators thrived in places that seemed quiet, unassuming, harmless, and she had spent a lifetime learning how to read them. Her phone buzzed, a text, no sender, "Don't think this is over." She studied it carefully, analyzing timing, phrasing, spacing. It wasn't random. Someone had been watching her. Someone knew she was capable. Someone was testing her patience. She pocketed the device and focused instead on the cafe, noting the exits, the staff movements, and the angles from which someone could approach undetected. Police had already visited, taking statements from witnesses. The three men had been released with a warning, insufficient evidence, no charges pressed. Rachel knew they would talk, embellish, speculate. And somewhere, someone with more authority would notice. The ripple effect of 15 seconds, she realized, could escalate quickly. Her mind drifted briefly to the missions that had defined her life. Night raids in foreign deserts, hostage extractions where a single mistake meant death, underwater operations where silence was survival. Each memory carried a weight, a lesson. She had left active duty after one mission went horribly wrong when her closest teammate didn't return. She thought leaving would end the constant tension, the constant vigilance. But the world had other plans. War, it seemed, had a way of following those who thought they had escaped it. Rachel finished her coffee, placing the cup carefully on its saucer. Her instincts were sharp, taut, alive. The men from the cafe were unlikely to disappear quietly. Opportunists rarely learned from humiliation alone, and someone else, someone higher up, was already moving in the shadows. Someone who didn't make mistakes. She walked out to her car, parked 2 blocks away, taking note of the environment as she always did. Eyes scanned the street, reflection in windows, the distant movement of pedestrians. Her tires were untouched, for now, but she couldn't ignore the subtle signs that danger had only just begun to circle. She had learned long ago that patience and observation often mattered more than brute strength. The text buzzed again. This time a photograph attached. A van parked near the docks, blurred figures moving inside, shadows of people who didn't belong. Rachel's stomach tightened. Her mind calculated distances, patrol timings, potential witnesses. The warehouse in the photo matched one she had noticed weeks ago on her evening walks, an abandoned shell that had always given her unease. Now, in the cold light of day, she understood why. The cafe incident hadn't been random. It had been the opening act. Rachel's thoughts returned to the cafe men. Small-time operators, reckless, loud. They had been testing her. Someone had likely sent them, or at least tipped them off. Whoever orchestrated this was patient, calculating, and aware of her habits. They had underestimated her, and they had learned the cost. But underestimating her a second time would be a different mistake entirely. She walked to the ocean's edge, letting the wind whip against her face. The waves crashed rhythmically, a reminder that time moved relentlessly forward. She felt the familiar tension coil in her shoulders, that old instinct that had never left. Watching, waiting, calculating. Survival wasn't just reflex, it was anticipation, and she had long ago learned to expect danger even when nothing appeared threatening. Her mind shifted again to the possibilities. The men from the cafe were small fry. The real threat, the one pulling the strings, would be far more dangerous. Experienced, patient, and confident enough to manipulate others. This wasn't just retaliation for humiliation. It was testing, scouting, reconnaissance. They were observing her responses, gauging her skill, and determining whether she was worth targeting or avoiding. Rachel returned to her apartment, entering silently, checking locks, windows, and surveillance angles. She moved methodically, a ghost in her own space. Her reflection in the mirror caught her eyes, steady, alert, calm, but she knew better. The eyes of a warrior never truly relax. Rest was temporary, vigilance permanent. She poured another cup of coffee and sat at her small table, reviewing mental maps of the docks, warehouse locations, routes of escape, and potential allies. Even retired, she still had contacts, former teammates, quietly loyal, ready if she called. But she wanted to assess first, strike only if necessary. The rules hadn't changed. The discipline hadn't changed. She had left active service, but she had never left preparation. As dusk approached, Rachel noticed movement across the street. A van parked, engine off, shadows shifting inside. Her heart rate didn't spike. She didn't need it to, but her mind cataloged every detail. Color of the van, license plate partially visible, number of people inside, their movements, the timing of their shifts. Observation first. Assessment. Plan. Then action. She thought about the cafe patrons, the whispers, the fear and fascination she had instilled in 15 seconds. But this was different. This wasn't a public spectacle. This was personal, targeted, dangerous. And now she realized she would have to act decisively, but only when the timing was perfect. Rachel sipped her coffee slowly. The sun dipped behind clouds, casting long shadows across the street. Somewhere out there, the orchestrator of this test was watching, waiting, confident that the next move would be theirs. But Rachel Hayes had never been predictable, never careless, never defeated. She allowed herself a small, subtle smile. 15 seconds had taught them a lesson. The next lesson would be far more permanent. She stood, stretching, and checked the rifle she kept hidden for emergencies, not for show but for protection. The world outside was calm, the town unaware, but danger never announced itself. It moved quietly, patiently, like a tide rising beneath the surface. And Rachel had learned long ago that tides, once rising, could be met with force or with ruin. She walked back to the window, eyes scanning the dockside warehouses, mentally mapping every angle. This wasn't just about the cafe incident anymore. This was about what lay beneath it. And she would be ready, always watching, always calculating. Night draped the town in darkness, but Rachel Hayes saw more than the casual eye could perceive. The street lamps flickered, casting long, wavering shadows, and the distant cry of gulls was drowned by the low hum of the ocean waves against the pier. She crouched behind a low concrete barrier near the docks, binoculars raised, scanning the abandoned warehouse she had noticed weeks earlier. The warehouse had always seemed off, the kind of place a casual passerby ignored, but her instincts had never been wrong. Tonight, her instincts screamed. Inside, faint silhouettes shifted, moving with deliberate purpose. Vans had pulled up, and from the shadows emerged young women escorted by men whose posture spoke of authority and experience. The figures were quick, efficient, and discreet. This wasn't random criminal activity. This was organized, professional, dangerous, and it involved people who weren't expecting resistance. Rachel's mind cataloged every detail. One van backed up near the dock entrance, engine quiet. She counted 4 guards stationed at the main entrance, 2 more at the side exit. The movements of the women suggested fear, confusion, and attempts at quiet compliance. Her pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled. Years of United States Navy SEALs training were still ingrained in her bones. Observation first, assessment, plan, action only when timing was perfect. She crouched low, scanning the perimeter. She noted security gaps, potential points of entry, escape routes for both herself and the captives. A faint light flickered in the window, a guard moving inside, unaware she had been watching for over 30 minutes. Rachel allowed herself a small smile. This was her element. As she crouched in the shadows, memories flooded her briefly. Missions overseas, hostage extractions under impossible conditions, silent operations where a single mistake meant death. She had left all of that behind, thinking quiet life, peaceful streets, and a slow rhythm of days would be enough. But danger didn't retire, not for those like her. 15 seconds at the cafe had been an awakening, a reminder that violence could come uninvited. Now the stakes were higher. Rachel's fingers traced the edge of her tactical knife hidden in her boot. Not for bravado, not for show, but for protection and precision. Every muscle in her body remembered its purpose. She calculated the number of guards, their positions, the pattern of their patrols. There were cameras, minimal but present, near the main entrance, likely unmonitored at this hour. She would disable them only if necessary, preferring stealth and timing over brute force. Her mind weighed options. She could alert authorities, leave the evidence, let them handle it, but she knew how slow bureaucracy could be. Hours might pass. Precious moments in which captives could be harmed or moved out of reach. And patience, though often a virtue in her line of work, had limits. 15 seconds at the cafe had taught her the cost of underestimation. She couldn't wait. Rachel shifted slightly, adjusting her jacket to prevent reflection. She had marked exits, mapped patrol patterns, and calculated angles for every possible encounter. She imagined herself moving through the warehouse silently, taking down threats without detection, guiding frightened captives to safety, all while leaving minimal trace. Each scenario was a mental rehearsal, meticulous, precise, and unrelenting. The warehouse shifted again. A guard moved closer to the side door. Rachel's breath remained steady. She noted his stride, weight distribution, and the slight pause before he turned. Timing. She waited for the moment when all variables aligned, the guard just far enough from others, the captive still hidden, the path to the water unobstructed. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of salt, oil, and wood. It masked her approach. Perfect. Her boots pressed lightly against the gravel, silent. Her movements were calculated, each step measured, until she reached a vantage point near the side entrance. She could see the interior more clearly now. Crates stacked haphazardly, machinery humming faintly, shadows twisting with the movements of people inside. Rachel's jaw tightened. This wasn't just petty crime or random mischief. These people were victims. Young women, likely coerced, terrified, unsure of what fate awaited them. Every instinct in her body, every memory of missions past, screamed at her to act. This wasn't just a test. This was a battle for survival, for freedom, for lives that might never get another chance. She glanced again at the ocean, dark and endless. Escape, if things went wrong, was possible. She calculated the distance, the angle of the pier, the timing of the waves. Contingencies were ready, but she didn't plan to fail. A soft click of a lock echoed from the front entrance, and she froze. One of the guards had shifted position, unaware she was observing. 15 seconds again, she thought. That was all it would take. 15 seconds to act, 15 seconds to change the outcome. Rachel crouched lower, her eyes narrowing, mind racing through every scenario, every outcome. The warehouse was alive with danger, but she was alive with preparation, observation, calculation, patience. Every instinct sharpened, every movement anticipated. She made her decision. This wasn't a moment to hesitate, a moment to doubt, or a moment to retreat. 15 seconds at the cafe had proven her capability. Tonight, she would test her own limits. She would enter the shadows willingly, not as prey, but as predator. Not for vengeance, not for spectacle, but for protection. Rachel stood, letting the night wind lift her hair slightly from her bun. She adjusted her jacket, her breathing deep and controlled. The warehouse waited, unaware that its time of unchecked authority was ending. 15 seconds, she reminded herself, could change everything. And tonight, they would learn exactly who they had underestimated. Darkness had a way of concealing truth, but for Rachel Hayes, it also illuminated possibilities. The warehouses along the docks were cloaked in shadow, fog rolling in from the Atlantic, carrying the scent of salt and diesel. Every detail mattered: the faint creak of a metal shutter, the slight reflection of a flashlight on a distant window, the muffled shuffle of boots across gravel. Rachel crouched low behind a stack of crates, her breathing slow and controlled, eyes scanning, calculating. She had spent hours planning this moment, mapping the guards' patrols, memorizing the angles of entry, knotting escape routes for herself and the captives inside. Every movement, every variable had been assessed and rehearsed mentally. It wasn't just instinct, though instinct would guide her when the unexpected inevitably happened. It was preparation, precision, control. 15 seconds at the cafe had been a warning to anyone foolish enough to underestimate her. Tonight, there would be no warning. Rachel pressed herself against the crates, silent as a shadow. The side door she had observed earlier had a single guard packing in front of it. He shifted, adjusting his flashlight beam in a casual sweep of the perimeter, unaware that Rachel had already measured the distance to the door, his stride, the point at which he would be most vulnerable. She waited. Patience was as much a weapon as any knife or firearm. Then he paused mid-step, checking his phone briefly. The opening appeared. Rachel moved, smooth, silent, precise. Every footfall placed carefully to avoid loose gravel or stray boards. Her jacket brushed softly against her thigh as she shifted into position. One hand on the door handle, she paused, listening. Inside, the faint murmurs of conversation, the shuffle of restrained captives, the low commands of the men in charge. Each sound a thread in the tapestry of the night, each movement recorded in her mind. She slipped inside, the door yielding silently to her pressure. Darkness swallowed her, but her eyes quickly adapted. Her pupils dilated, absorbing the faint light spilling from overhead bulbs, reflecting off metal crates, stacks of boxes, and the occasional glimmer of machinery. Her breathing remained steady, every movement deliberate, every step measured. She had done this before countless times in distant lands, under conditions far more hostile. The only difference now was the stakes. These were innocent lives, not enemies on a battlefield. She moved toward the first room where the captives were held, hidden behind crates and flimsy barricades. Their whispers were soft, frightened, unaware of the presence of help already in the room. Rachel's heart tightened, not with fear but with focus. Each girl was a variable she had to account for. Her movements guided them into shadows, away from sight lines, toward the exit she had mentally mapped moments ago. Then a sound, a guard moving too close unaware. Rachel froze, pressed herself against the wall, eyes narrowing. The man's flashlight swung erratically, sweeping the floor in a slow arc. Timing was everything. 15 seconds, she thought again. That was all it would take. One precise strike, one lock of a wrist, and he would be neutralized without alarm. The man stepped closer. Rachel's hand moved almost invisibly. Her grip on her tactical knife was firm but controlled. She pivoted, delivering a soft but effective strike to the back of his knee. He collapsed silently, landing with a muted thud behind a stack of crates. His weapon clattered and Rachel moved it out of reach, securing the threat before panic could spread. She exhaled softly, letting the rhythm of the warehouse guide her movements. One by one, she guided the captives from their rooms, leading them toward the designated exit. Each step was deliberate, each movement calculated to avoid detection. There was no chaos here, only precision, efficiency, and calm control. The captives, too frightened to speak, followed her silently, trusting instincts they did not yet understand. As she reached the central room, voices became clearer, louder, more confident. The man from the cafe appeared, but now in the company of others, armed and aware that someone was inside. "Stop right there," he barked, brandishing a gun. Confidence replaced caution for a moment. He believed he had the upper hand. Rachel didn't flinch. Her stance was relaxed but ready, calculated. She stepped forward, voice soft but firm. "You made a mistake." The man fired a shot, but Rachel moved with fluid precision, sidestepping, closing the distance before his weapon could realign. Her hand was on his wrist, twisting, disarming him in one swift, controlled motion. He crumpled to the floor, stunned by the sudden reversal. 15 seconds again. She had always known that efficiency, timing, and calm execution mattered more than brute force, and her experience in the United States Navy SEALs had honed that principle to perfection. Behind her, the captives waited silently, eyes wide but beginning to understand that safety had arrived. Rachel gestured for them to move, guiding them toward the exit. One by one, they followed, stepping lightly, keeping low, trusting her implicitly. Even as she led them out, her mind scanned for the next threat. She had more guards to neutralize, more rooms to clear. Every step was mental calculation, muscle memory, and instinct intertwined. There would be no mistakes tonight, not for the captives, not for herself, not for anyone foolish enough to underestimate her. As she reached the final hallway, a low hum of machinery echoed, a reminder that the warehouse, though dark and shadowed, was alive with potential danger. But Rachel Hayes thrived in danger. Every calculation, every plan, every past mission had prepared her for this exact moment. And she moved forward silently, decisively, ready for whatever awaited in the shadows. The warehouse felt alive, its shadows stretching across crates and machinery like dark fingers. Rachel Hayes moved silently, guiding the last of the captives toward the exit she had marked. The air smelled of oil and salt, faintly metallic. Her senses were heightened. Every sound, every flicker of light, every movement was logged and analyzed. She could feel the presence of someone watching, someone confident, someone experienced. The leader, the person who had orchestrated the men in the cafe and controlled the entire operation. He emerged from a doorway ahead, calm and composed, a pistol in hand. Unlike the others, there was no hesitation, no nervousness. His eyes were sharp, calculating, assessing her every movement. "You've caused quite a mess," he said, his voice low but firm, almost amused. "But this isn't your fight anymore." Rachel didn't flinch. Her stance was relaxed, ready, every muscle coiled yet fluid. She measured the distance, noting the angle of his weapon, the space between them, potential obstacles. "Wrong," she replied softly. "This has always been my fight." He fired. The shot echoed against metal walls. Rachel pivoted just in time, the bullet grazing the crate behind her. She closed the distance with rapid precision, moving closer before he could take another shot. One flick of her wrist, a step to the side, and the gun was disarmed. The leader's eyes widened, not in fear but in acknowledgement of skill. But he was prepared. He lunged, swinging a metal rod, forcing Rachel to duck, twist, and counter. Sparks flew as metal met concrete. The fight was immediate, close, and brutal. Every move was calculated. Every strike and counter a dance honed by years of experience in the United States Navy SEALs. Rachel's calm precision met his aggression at every turn. The leader backed up, then shifted tactics, attempting to flank her. Rachel anticipated, sidestepping, twisting, bringing her elbow down into his ribs, forcing him against a stack of crates. He grunted but recovered quickly, swinging the rod again. Her training kicked in. Anticipation, reaction, prediction. 15 seconds, or maybe less, could decide the outcome. She disarmed him again, this time knocking him to the floor and securing his weapon. Her movements were swift, precise, controlled. The captives watched from the shadows, silent but aware that danger had not yet passed. Rachel gestured for them to stay hidden, keeping her focus on the leader who refused to yield. He rose, a sneer on his face, clearly frustrated but composed. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "You can't stop what's coming. There are others." Rachel didn't respond. Words were useless here. Only action mattered. She delivered a controlled, precise strike that left him incapacitated, ensuring he could no longer endanger anyone. Her breathing remained steady. Her eyes scanned the room, every exit, every shadow, every remaining threat. The captives moved quietly, following her lead. Rachel guided them through the warehouse, keeping to shadows, moving silently, leading them toward the exit she had prepared. Outside, the night air hit their faces, cold and salty but free. Relief was evident on their faces, even as fear lingered. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The moment itself was enough. Safety was enough. Rachel moved back toward the incapacitated leader, securing him with zip ties from her pack. Every action was deliberate. She checked his pockets, knotting communication devices and keys, ensuring no escape or backup would arrive unseen. Efficiency, precision, control. 15 seconds could have been enough to change everything, but Rachel had used minutes of preparation to ensure permanence. Sirens approached in the distance, police responding to her earlier anonymous tip. She didn't wait. She watched them arrive, watching the officers take control of the scene. Evidence was collected, captives were cared for, and the criminal operation was dismantled before it could recover. Rachel remained in the shadows, observing from a distance, her presence unseen but her work complete. The captives were escorted to safety, each one offering a hesitant, grateful glance toward the figure who had freed them. Rachel nodded softly, her heart steady but heavy with the weight of the night. Each rescue carried memories, echoes of missions past, of decisions made in life-or-death situations. She had chosen to act. She had chosen to intervene. She had chosen to protect, and that choice always left an imprint on the soul. The leader, now in police custody, stared at her as she slipped away into the darkness. No words were exchanged. He understood silently that the woman who had infiltrated his operation, who had disarmed him, who had saved lives without hesitation, was no ordinary threat. 15 seconds at the cafe had been a warning. Now, the full force of her capability had been revealed. Rachel didn't linger. She disappeared into the fog, retracing her mental map to ensure no one followed. Every shadow, every corner, every turn was accounted for. She moved with precision, her body and mind still honed from years of disciplined training. The night was quiet once more, but she knew calm was temporary. Danger never truly left. As she reached a high vantage point overlooking the docks, she allowed herself a small moment to observe the ocean. Waves crashed rhythmically against the pier, gulls circled above. The town slept unaware of the battle that had unfolded in its shadows. She exhaled slowly. Lives had been saved. The operation was dismantled. And yet, vigilance remained. Rachel Hayes had entered the shadows to protect the innocent, to dismantle an operation that preyed on the weak, and to remind anyone foolish enough to challenge her. She was never an easy target. 15 seconds could change a life, but preparation, skill, and resolve could change the outcome forever. She vanished into the night, her figure swallowed by darkness, leaving only the echo of efficiency, courage, and quiet heroism behind. The morning after the warehouse raid, the town awoke as though nothing had happened. Cafes filled with their usual patrons, fishermen unloaded their catches along the pier, and the gulls cried overhead. Life continued its rhythm, unbroken, unaware of the storm that had passed in the shadows the night before. Rachel Hayes sat in a quiet corner of her apartment, nursing a cup of coffee, watching the news scroll across her screen. Headlines exploded. Trafficking ring dismantled. Unknown hero saves multiple victims. Local authorities praise swift operation. Her name was nowhere to be found. She hadn't expected it to be. She never had. Recognition, fame, accolades, none of it mattered. Rachel's satisfaction came from the certainty that the victims were safe, that the threat had been neutralized, and that she had executed her mission with precision. Still, she allowed herself a small moment of quiet reflection. The echo of adrenaline lingered in her veins, a subtle hum reminding her that the night had been real, dangerous, and consequential. Memories drifted unbidden, years overseas, missions no one would ever know about, friends who had fallen in foreign deserts, the weight of decisions made in moments too brief to measure. 15 seconds at the cafe had triggered all of it, a reminder that even in ordinary life, danger could appear uninvited. Her life had always been about control, preparation, and anticipation. She had survived because she had embraced the rhythm of vigilance. And tonight, she realized, the rhythm would never truly stop. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated before checking it. The message was short. "You made enemies. Don't think this ends here." She stared at the screen, eyes narrowing. There was no fear, just a measured acknowledgement of reality. Danger had a way of following her, even when she thought she had left it behind. 15 seconds could have been enough to warn her, but she had already used minutes, hours, and years of experience to prepare for this moment. Rachel turned away from the phone and walked to the window. The ocean stretched endlessly, silvered by early morning light, waves rolling rhythmically against the pier. She watched a lone fisherman haul in his net, oblivious to the events that had unfolded behind the docks. In many ways, the world remained blissfully unaware. But that was not her life. Rachel's life existed in the intersections between ordinary and extraordinary, where danger lurked quietly beneath calm surfaces. The news continued to cover the rescue, emphasizing the bravery of the unknown hero. Local authorities praised quick and decisive action, but refused to disclose the identity of the operative, citing operational security. Rachel allowed herself a faint smile. She had never wanted acknowledgement. Action mattered more than applause. Lives mattered more than headlines. Yet she could not deny the subtle warmth of satisfaction that came from knowing her work had tangible impact. Later that day, the cafe owner approached her quietly. "Thank you," he said, voice low, eyes sincere. I don't know who you are, but you saved lives. You saved this town from something worse." Rachel nodded, offering a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "No one needs to know my name," she said softly. "It's enough that people are safe." The man looked at her curiously, as if trying to reconcile her calm presence with the chaos she had dismantled the night before. Rachel simply walked away, blending seamlessly into the normal rhythm of the cafe's patrons and sunlight spilling across polished tables. Even as life returned to routine, Rachel's mind remained alert. Every reflection in a window, every shadow on the wall, every unexpected sound triggered an instinctual assessment. She walked along familiar streets, observed people moving through the pier, and traced the same routes she had walked countless times, noting details others overlooked. Safety was temporary, vigilance was permanent. The warehouse raid had ended, but the world continued to harbor unseen threats. She knew that. That evening, she returned home, exhausted but resolute. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat quietly, letting the rhythm of the ocean beyond her window guide her thoughts. She allowed herself a rare reflection. She had acted decisively, saved lives, neutralized threats, and returned to the shadows without recognition. Yet she felt an unfamiliar weight, the awareness that the men and women she had saved now carried pieces of her legacy, the memory of someone who acted without hesitation when it mattered most. Her phone buzzed again, another unknown number. She ignored it. Rachel Hayes had learned long ago that not every message required response, not every threat warranted engagement, and not every encounter demanded action. Patience, observation, and preparation were her constant companions. She had survived 15 seconds at the cafe, hours in the warehouse, and years in far worse conditions. One more unknown call would not unbalance her. The ocean roared beneath the pier, waves crashing against the shore. Rachel closed her eyes briefly, letting the rhythm calm her pulse, centering herself. Her body relaxed slightly, but the tension in her mind remained. Vigilance was habitual, ingrained. 15 seconds could change lives, but preparation could change outcomes. She had learned that lesson repeatedly, and she would continue to honor it. Before sleep, Rachel looked at the horizon one last time. The town slept, unaware of the night's events, of the danger that had been present, and of the lives that had been altered. She had given safety, protection, and quiet justice without recognition, without applause, without expectation. That was who she was. That was who she would always be. Outside, the world continued, calm and indifferent, but Rachel Hayes remained alert. Life would carry on for everyone else, but she would watch, calculate, and prepare. Danger never rested, and neither would she. The ocean waves echoed her resolve, steady, relentless, and unyielding. And somewhere beyond the calm streets, the shadows stirred again. Someone had noticed, someone had planned, someone had learned. 15 seconds at the cafe had been a warning. The warehouse raid had been a lesson. And Rachel Hayes, silent, vigilant, and unstoppable, was already ready for what came next. The sun had barely risen, casting pale light over the quiet streets, when Rachel Hayes stepped out for her morning walk. The ocean breeze was cool, brushing her face, carrying the familiar scent of salt and seaweed. Life in the town moved at its slow, predictable pace, fishermen unloading nets, children laughing along the pier, cafe owners arranging pastries. To anyone else, it was ordinary. To Rachel, it was an illusion of safety. 15 seconds at the cafe, and the warehouse raid had proven that danger often lurked behind calm surfaces. She moved deliberately, scanning reflections in shop windows, noting shadows along alleys, ears attuned to the slightest shift in sound. Her body felt relaxed, but her mind remained vigilant. Even after rescuing the captives, neutralizing the criminals, and observing the town return to normalcy, Rachel knew the ripple effects of the night's events had only begun. Those who orchestrated the operations she had dismantled would learn, adapt, and perhaps seek revenge. 15 seconds was enough to test her, but she would always be ready. Passing a small park, she noticed a young man practicing martial movements with a trainer. His form was rough, unpolished, but determination shone in his eyes. Rachel paused, watching him, silently recalling her own early days of training, the countless hours of discipline, failure, and relentless improvement. She had once been like him, driven by a desire to excel, to survive, to master herself against overwhelming odds. A thought struck her: preparation, observation, vigilance. These weren't skills meant solely for war or clandestine operations. They were lessons for life, for survival, for resilience. Rachel had lived those lessons every day, carrying their weight quietly, invisibly. And perhaps it was time to pass them on, subtly, without fanfare, without recognition. She approached the young man's trainer, nodding politely. "Mind if I offer a tip?" she asked softly. The trainer looked surprised but welcomed her advice. Rachel demonstrated a simple adjustment to stance, a subtle shift in balance, a refined grip. The young man repeated the motion, his eyes widening in sudden understanding. Rachel smiled faintly, stepping back. Mentorship, she realized, could be as quiet as observation, as subtle as a whisper in the right moment. She didn't need applause. She didn't need recognition. She needed only to instill readiness, confidence, and resilience. The ocean called to her as always, and Rachel walked to the pier. She paused at the edge, watching waves crash rhythmically against the pilings. The events of the past days replayed in her mind. The 15 seconds at the cafe, the warehouse infiltration, the confrontation with the leader, the rescue of terrified captives. Each moment reinforced the truth she had always known. Preparation was everything, vigilance was survival, and skill without calm was worthless. She allowed herself a brief reflection on her own journey. She had left the United States Navy SEALs, but the lessons had never left her. Life outside active duty had not dulled her instincts. It had sharpened them in different ways. Civilians who underestimated her assumed weakness. That assumption had been corrected countless times, most recently in 15 seconds of controlled, precise action. Rachel's phone buzzed once more, another unknown number. She ignored it. Threats were constant, but her focus was on preparedness, not fear. She had survived ambushes, missions where survival seemed improbable, and encounters designed to test her limits. One more message was insignificant. She was ready, always ready. Her eyes scanned the horizon. Somewhere beyond the visible docks, shadows moved. Not random, not careless, organized. She noted the possibility of future threats, always calculating, always observing. The world never stopped presenting dangers, but Rachel Hayes had learned that calm, preparation, and decisive action could tip the scales. 15 seconds could warn her, but her vigilance ensured she controlled the outcome. She returned to the town streets, blending effortlessly among the townsfolk. No one noticed her presence. No one recognized the warrior who had dismantled a trafficking operation. No one understood the calm beneath the ordinary exterior. That was intentional. Rachel thrived in invisibility, in being underestimated, in observing before acting. The rescued captives were safe, the criminals in custody, yet she knew the balance was temporary. She had always known it would be. Peace was fleeting, vigilance eternal. She allowed herself a small, private smile. She didn't need to be admired. She didn't need recognition. The work mattered, the lessons mattered, and the quiet knowledge that she had changed outcomes, that she had saved lives, was reward enough. Rachel walked back to her apartment as the sun climbed higher, its light spilling across the pier. Her reflection in a shop window caught her eye. Calm, composed, alert, ordinary yet prepared, invisible yet unstoppable. She adjusted her jacket, checking her posture subtly, noting the reflections and angles that could conceal or reveal her. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. 15 seconds, she thought. That was enough to teach a lesson, to save a life, to change the course of events. But preparation, observation, and skill could change everything. And Rachel Hayes had mastered all three. She paused at the edge of her balcony, looking out over the town she had protected, the ocean stretching infinitely beyond it. She had saved lives without recognition, acted decisively without fanfare, and prepared for threats that no one else noticed. Her work was not complete. She knew it never would be, but she had proven one thing. Anyone who underestimated her would learn, as they always had, that she was not an easy target. Not at 15 seconds, not at 15 minutes, not ever. Rachel Hayes stepped back inside, letting the door close softly behind her. The world went on, calm and unaware, while she remained vigilant, prepared, and ready. The shadows might stir again, threats might rise, but she would be waiting, always ready, always watching, always in control. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the town and beyond, the ripple effect of her actions would continue. But Rachel Hayes, silent, precise, and unstoppable, would remain as she always had, a force of skill, discipline, and quiet heroism.